Hey, everybody. I'm Tony. In case you didn't know my name is Tony again. And I just want to welcome you all to our very first live recording ever of our podcast. Ever.
Okay, I'm going to really try to not mess this up and do it 3 times like I usually do in the studio. So
Yeah.
bear with me.
Well, that's the beauty behind the scenes. Is giving sometimes you mess up, and girl, nobody's perfect over here, so
Exactly.
hit it.
I don't have my cough button.
Hey, everybody. Welcome to Season 7 of Surface Level, curious conversations about the Black and queer experience. I'm one of your hosts, Jordan, and today, Damon Tony and I are recording live from Moby Talks in New York City, discussing our community's fixation with Black excellence. How does the concept of Black excellence hurt the Black community? How can we challenge traditional notions of success? This is Black excellence is a scam.
Now the ghetto.
The ghetto.
Ghetto.
I mean, can you
Wow.
believe it? This is Season 7.
Yes.
There are a few friends
And
here
that's
with
my
us.
favorite number.
It's Tony's favorite number. It's a live show. We've been talking about doing a live show
Since
we did
season
it.
1.
since we
Right.
started, but the checks wasn't right yet. So we finally got to a point where we could actually do this production the way that we wanted to.
Yeah.
And so this is a huge milestone for us. Moby is an incredibly important partner to us, Mobilizing Our Brothers Initiative. We've been working with them for say like the past year and a half so far, and it's been amazing. So tonight is really all about community. That's what our show is all about. So yeah, we're ready to get into some things
Always
for
with the
season
game.
7.
I love getting into some things. You know what it gives over here. So
Yes, I do. Actually,
very well.
yeah.
So what's the tea?
Oh, it's me.
It is you.
So this season we're doing a bit of a conceptual season. Typically we have 10 topics throughout the season. This time we're breaking them up into 3 different segments, themed Earth, Wind, and Fire, each representing our different personalities. So the first 3 episodes are our Earth series, speaking about grounding things, and they will be led by Jordan. Our second set of 3 episodes will be the Wind series about freedom and about things that maybe get a little bit out of control, which will be led by Tony. And then our final set will be Fire, things that can be a bit of a hot button, things that get a little wild, and that will be led by myself.
Yes.
So as we start off, we're very, very excited to do the first episode of our our Earth series with you all here today.
Okay. And if you are familiar with our show, we always start off with a game. And you all are going to be able to participate in that. We are going to play a game called the Mediocre Debate.
Oh.
Okay. And so what I'm going to do is offer a series of opposing views. These are real views that we've talked about on the podcast in previous seasons, previous episodes. And you all are going to vote on which opinion was more mediocre.
Okay.
And then afterwards, the author, the speaker of that mediocre opinion will share how they grew from that perspective or how they haven't. All right, which opinion is more mediocre? Season 1, Episode 1, entitled The Politics of Quarantine, we discussed the 2020 Black Lives Matter protests. Opinion 1. We respect the incremental contributions and changes individuals are comfortable making to better protect Black lives. Opinion 2. Everyone needs to step far out of their comfort zone and make tangible sacrifices to better protect Black lives. Which one was more mediocre? No surprise.
This is our first ever surface level fight.
Oh my God.
This was our
Those
first
girls were
episode,
fighting.
and it was an actual fight.
So it's funny because we recorded this episode like the weekend after all the protests started for the George Floyd. So like just to give you context about the temperature of the country and the conversations that were happening, this is when that happened.
Right.
So they got you, girl.
Yeah. So I mean, so just to give you, just to reveal, opinion 1 was me, and opinion 2 was Damon, and I still feel the same way. I think that people can advocate and make a difference for community outside of protest. That was what we were kind of talking about. There's obviously boycotting, there's like social media that you can look into, there's donating, there's volunteer work, and I stand by that. I don't think that going out and protesting in the streets is the only way to do that. And I also will allow people to have a bit of grace to feel comfortable going into those situations, because it can be pretty overwhelming if you're not used to that sort of environment. So
No, absolutely. I think first of all, I'm always in the middle of the fights. And so when the girls are
Always.
fighting, I'm sitting there. It's like a ping pong situation going back and forth. And in the moment, I'm the net. Oh, well, that's okay. I can get into that. But no, I think that at the time, because of where we were in the world, you know, Damon is very passionate and is giving like, girl, you need to
Burn it down.
Burn it down. And Jordan was like, I'm not quite there yet. And I was like, well, there's space for both. I still think there's space for both. And you still stand firm on your opinion, and so does Damon, I'm sure.
10 toes
so
down.
no one's evolved.
and I ain't changing. All right, let's move on to the next scenario. All right, so this is season 3, episode 3, entitled Before He Cheats. And we discussed the role that monogamy and infidelity plays in our relationships. And so, opinion 1, monogamy is not a realistic goal to place on relationships. I'm open to existing in a relationship where there are no parameters or rules.
Oh, wow.
Opinion 2, monogamy is realistic. It's a personal preference and the goal for me when it comes to relationships.
I feel like I know where this is going.
Okay.
Let's see. Some of the girls are lying. Some of the girls are lying. I'm going to just call it out.
Are we really neck and neck? Okay.
Wow.
Y'all need to keep voting.
Don't close the polls.
Don't close the
Count
poll.
every legal vote.
Count every legal vote. Yeah, I mean, you know, what was interesting about this episode is that I think Jordan started and is on one side of the spectrum, and you'll reveal who was who. But let's do that first.
Okay.
Oh, wow.
Let's reveal who was who.
It's 50-50.
Look, let's just go with 50-50. All right. Everybody, we are continuing on the conversation. Can everyone please keep your voices down? Thank you. All right. So the reveal, opinion 1 was Damon, and opinion 2 was me. So I'll let Damon talk about how he has changed since then.
I haven't changed. I think
I
that
didn't think so.
No, I just think that people can create relationships that work for them. I think that it's not about what's prescribed through heteronormative like goals, and that for me is not something as a queer person that I'm ever aspiring to. And that to me is what so much of the idea of monogamy and a very traditional relationship is based on. And yeah, that's really straightforward. I don't have anything else to add to that.
Jordan, has your opinion evolved?
It has. So I just want to address what Damon said really quick. I don't think that monogamy is this heteronormative thing. I think that all people on this earth can lean towards monogamy or polyamory or asexuality. We come in all different colors and sizes and shapes and spectrums and all of that. So I just think that be whoever you want to be. But my answer has changed.
As of today.
No. It's been like
On
it's
the way
changed.
over here.
It's
On the
changed.
way over
You
here.
saw somebody in the hallway and was just like,
No.
I could get with
Yeah.
him, and I can get with this, and I can get with that.
Somebody did offer me poppers before I got to the stage. You know who you are. I'm not gonna say your name.
Congratulations.
I was like, oh, okay, well, not yet. Maybe later tonight. But no, I have changed a little bit. For me, monogamy isn't so much like the end-all, be-all. Like, I think that for me, I'm open to exploring what non-monogamous formats look like. I think that if it's a spectrum of monogamy and polygamy, I definitely think that I'm still closer to this monogamous side. But yeah, I'm open to it. But I think that, you know, it needs to be open communication. We need to have clear rules, and there needs to be very clear consensus at the beginning. I don't want any surprises.
So this is a very new revelation.
It's not that new, Tony.
It happened in the hall.
It actually is.
Wait a minute. Do I have to give you the rules?
What was
You
the
gonna
rules?
jump across the table on Tony?
Listen,
Well,
no.
I made the
it
rules.
actually,
I wrote the
it
damn
actually is a new revelation because that's not been your opinion up until. This is the first time I'm hearing you say that.
Tony, why would you lie like that?
I'm not lying, and I don't care who tell it, but this ain't the one.
Damon, stick up for
but
me.
what I will say, listen,
Jordan's
no,
telling the
listen,
truth this time. Now I'm the net. How I get in it?
On the episode,
He's telling the truth.
On the episode, as of when?
You don't listen to me.
We revisited this topic.
As of
See,
last season.
we got a guest.
Yeah.
People, a listener.
Don't matter. So what I was gonna say is that on that episode, though, in real time, like Damon's always been the more open person, and Jordan and I were always like monogamy. But I think that through having these conversations, and thank God, we have evolved in those opinions. And so,
Well, we said start off in monogamy and then maybe explore things
We did say that.
afterwards. So now you remember.
Y'all know.
All right.
next question.
Next.
We need a gavel.
All right.
need a gavel.
Be like Kaya.
Let's go to the next one. So, season 5, episode 2, entitled Mask for Mask, we discuss femphobia and our community's relationship with masculinity. Opinion 1. For a long time, I rejected the idea that someone more feminine than me could top me. Opinion 2. As I'm getting older, I'm finding less thrill in the trade. Match my energy, and my energy sounds more like Doja Cat.
Wow. Get you a feminine top.
A blouse like this.
A blouse. I love a blouse. Blouses are nice.
So, okay, I mean, it's a
All right.
It's a stark
it's a
difference.
decisive win here.
This is a decisive group for this one. Okay, so as the reveal, opinion 1 was Tony.
Oh.
Opinion 2 was me. And so, Tony, would you like to elaborate or give us some context on where you stand today?
Well, yeah, for context, it says for a long time, past tense, for a long time, I did reject the idea that someone more feminine could top me, but then I've evolved in that opinion, and I think the girls are missing out. Get you a feminine top, get you a blouse. As a friend of ours to the show said, go and run over to Rainbow, get you a blouse. And yeah,
A rainbow
Rainbow.
blouse. I don't want a rainbow
I don't want
blouse.
a rainbow blouse either. That's a cheap
okay.
blouse. So I've changed.
I've changed.
I've evolved.
Okay.
Okay.
Okay, great. All right, and our final scenario of the game, on season 6, episode 3, entitled You Ain't Black, we had Kaylin Allen on our show to discuss the impact of respectability politics.
Yes.
Opinion 1, I can dress formally to avoid distractions from my ideas at work without altering my character. Opinion 2, just because I'm not in a suit doesn't mean I'm less capable than someone who is. It keeps going down. Okay.
Wow.
Opinion 1 was me, and opinion 2 was Tony. And I still feel the same way. I mean, when we did this conversation, that specific clip, a lot of people had comments, and I was kind of like reading through them. I'm like, damn, people really hate what I said. And I think for me, I've always just been okay with the concept of dressing for the occasion. I grew up in a uniform school. My introduction into the world of business, I was required to wear a suit in college. And for me, I just assumed that business meetings, boardrooms meant suits in the same way that church meant suits, in the same way that, you know, you wear a certain outfit for a certain thing. And so for me, I don't necessarily associate dressing up in a suit for work with, you know, this idea that you're being oppressed or that you're selling out. Although I do understand that some people link wearing a suit with their self-worth and their own self-dignity. I actually like suits, and I think they're cute. And I have a lot of them.
Very surprised you didn't have a suit on today.
I'm surprised too.
Well, because
you love a suit.
Because you told us that we had to wear leather, and I don't have a leather suit.
You didn't have a leather vest until I told you we had to wear leather, so I thought you were going to find a leather suit.
Well, leather suit's a little bit more expensive.
no, but listen,
You said I can't afford sleeves.
I've always been of the opinion of like, how much of myself do I have to lose to fit in for some, like how often do I have to tap dance to do the thing to make somebody else feel good about my just existence? And so I'm not willing to do that. And like we talked about earlier on in my career, sure, I was still learning, didn't know who I was, wasn't firm in my ideas, and then later on I was just like, yeah, that's not for me, and I can still reach the same level of success as the girl across from me wearing the suit just by wearing a t-shirt or whatever it is that I want to put on that is my expression. So I still stand in that opinion, even though the girls in this room seem to not get it.
All right, cool. So that was our game, and now we're going to actually get into this conversation about Black excellence. And there's been a lot of conversation about Black excellence, Black mediocrity, and that whole concept. And so before we get into the conversation, if we go to the next slide, I would love for everyone to just write down what words come to mind when you hear Black excellence. And while you're doing that, why don't we discuss? Let's start with you, Damon.
The words that came to mind initially for me were like wealth, being the first, because that's the thing that comes up often. HBCUs, like that to me, like being all three of us being Howard grads, like that's something that was very top of mind for me, and like this concept of like making your ancestors proud, and that's not a word, I guess it's a phrase, but those were the things that when I initially think of when we think about the social media hashtags, when we talk about the conversations that happened around our kitchen tables, like so much of it is based in those concepts for me. Tony?
So for me, I wrote down elite, I wrote down the gold standard, top tier, possibility model, and then for some reason, with Black excellence, I think about theater in Hollywood and like the glitz and the glam.
That's fair. Jordan? I think a lot of Black excellence is attributed to people with public platforms. So I actually had like a similar thing, which was accomplishments, historic, meaning like making history, having influence and having power. So I think that, we're like pretty spot on with the room. Success looking like the most popular word associated with Black excellence, and wealth and elitism and perfectionism, freedom. What are some of the smaller ones?
Whitewashed, white patriarchy.
Unachievable.
The upper echelon.
Cute.
Did we name an episode that?
We did have an episode called The Upper Echelon.
The Rock Nation brunch.
Outdated. That one's interesting.
All right, so I'm just going to give you all just the dictionary.com, Black excellence. So that refers to a high level of achievement, success, or ability demonstrated by an individual Black person or by Black people in general. And so the first question that I want to pose to Damon and Tony is, how do you think the concept of Black excellence impacts Black people both positively and negatively? Tony, let's start with you.
Okay, well, I like to bring a little bit of research to the table.
Tony's card.
Let's start with this because I found this dope-ass article called "Our Obsession with Black Excellence is Harming Black People" on Forbes.com. It says that Black exceptionalism encourages Black people to sacrifice their health, mental well-being, and welfare for the sake of greatness. Black excellence is an unreachable peak. Nothing is ever good enough. It's insatiable. There is always one more mountain to climb, and it's not sustainable. And what happens to the Black people in society, that society does not deem or recognize as excellence? Like, what happens to those folks? So it goes on to say that there needs to be a shift in what we glorify, and that Black excellence is not just the first to accomplish the unimaginable or those who achieve accolades and awards, but Black excellence is simply existing in a world that so desperately wants to destroy you. Get into it. Get into it. And so
there's applause. That's new.
Well, we're officially on The View, which is one of my favorite shows ever.
You are Barbara.
But no, on the positive side, I think that a possibility model is a positive thing. I stand firm on that. And having representation is important because seeing is believing. And so affirming Blackness and speaking highly of ourselves to ourselves is necessary. However, it has to be more than just a hashtag. A hashtag is fleeting. And I think that we also can't normalize that Black people who are doing great things and they're rare. They're the exception. It's like, no, bitch. Actually, we're the rule. And on the negative side, Black people who are deemed excellence have a bar to reach that I think sometimes is just too high. It's not too high, it's actually one that can't be reached. Going back to the article, it's saying there's one more mountain to climb. It never, it's not good enough. Mm-hmm. And I think about Black people who are deemed excellent being scrutinized for being excellent. And so I'm going to give an example that might be polarizing, but Beyonce not winning Album of the Year, but being the most decorated Grammy Award artist in history is an example of being punished for being excellent.
Well, that was one of the feedback, like one of the voters actually went on the record.
Yes.
I think it was in a Variety article that said that they didn't like how every time Beyonce released music, it was this thing where you had to stop and look at it, and it felt obnoxious. And I don't know if he used the word obnoxious, but that's the gist. And that was the reason why he didn't vote for her, because it was given like, you have too much and you're good.
And I'm not saying that she's beyond reproach. She can't be scrutinized, but it's nasty work when you scrutinize her to spite her talent.
Right, but that's not... Talk about the music. Don't tell me you didn't vote because you thought that she was serving too much.
Right.
Like, come on. That's too much.
Tell me you thought Alien Superstar was terrible. Then I know you're lying, but whatever.
What do you guys...
It's funny, stay out of my head, because what I wrote down for positive was possibility model. Because I do think that often in our communities, we don't know how far we can go, what we can do. Like, I just think about my own life, and like, I've been places, seen things that like my parents or just like people in my life they've never seen. Like, been places that like my father passed a few years ago, and it's just like had never been out of the country or seen all types of things in the world. And I think that as we see more of what can be, it makes you more curious about all the things you can learn and all the things you can experience and all the people you can meet and all the things that exist in the world. Negatively, conversely, it's often too tied to capitalism. It's too tied to how much money you have, how many things you can own, how far you can climb the corporate ladder, and worshiping the people that exist in those spaces. And that's not a spite. Like, we work in corporate America, and part of our lives has been climbing that ladder. And that has been something that has been important to parts of our career. Additionally, I think it's too often focused in like singularity. It's about the first or the best or the only.
It's about you.
Right. And it's just like, and it's always like this who's doing a new thing. But it's just like, there are so many things that we can do so differently, and we're all individuals. So like, we talk about Beyonce. It's just, there are so many other Black women that sing or perform or that do so many things that we can highlight. And like, there's so much time of there's this thing where they can only be one.
Right.
And if you're not the one, then you're not excellent.
Listen, it's exhausting.
Yeah.
Not being the one, maybe what's wrong with being the two?
Nothing. White men and women are mediocre every day. Therefore.
Yeah.
Jordan?
I mean, so the positive for me, so growing up, I felt a bit different just because I was gay, obviously. But I just felt like because I wasn't athletic, because I wasn't doing the boys things, I felt like I didn't really have a space to be recognized as much. And so for me, I learned at a very early age to lean on accomplishments and excelling in schoolwork and excelling with like getting jobs and like trying to like build my own self-worth to prove to other people that I too can be celebrated. And I think that from a very young age, the concept of Black excellence like sort of motivated me to create something for myself. And I think that it was mostly helpful through my like young adult life, but I think that a negative is that I learned, you know, a little bit later in my career that Black excellence, when taken too far, can become
a scam.
Yeah, like, you know, it's like a fucking like domino effect, right? Wherever your place of work is, you do a good job, right? And then people know you for doing a great job, and so they put you on extra projects, or they ask you to do this, or they ask you to do that, and then they expect you to bring that excellent part of yourself to that too. And before you know it, it's like, I'm burnt out and I'm not even getting paid more for these things. And it's just because I'm doing all of this extra work to signal to people that I'm good enough.
Right.
And I think that the negative thing can be like actually truly believing that what you produce and what value you're able to produce for other people is somehow indicative of your value as a human being. And so I think that it can be negative if you aren't able to sort of create strong boundaries between, you know, how you're able to sort of like create an impact for others and how you're willing to actually show up for yourself in private.
Because also being in corporate America, being in white spaces, you're so often the one. And you feel like you're walking into that space, and now I have to represent every black person in America so that hopefully when you are hiring, there's not some bias that I've created, that you look at every resume that comes across your desk with a name that you maybe don't understand how to pronounce and say, maybe not her, she's not a good culture fit. And like that's the level of pressure we create sometimes to like, I have to strive so that when I leave X organization and Damon from Hampton shows up, that they're not looked down upon, that they can be viewed as like, oh, that person may have a unique perspective that we don't have here and we should continue to invest in it. And that becomes exhausting.
Yeah, I'm tired. I stopped subscribing or prescribing or whatever to that notion and just allowing myself to exist and be. And when you move in a space that's just unbothered, it's so freeing. It's giving very much of like, nothing can have that power over me, right?
Exactly.
You can't shake me.
And it can be very challenging, right, to sort of surrender that concept coming up into your career, because oftentimes what I witness is that black people who do really, really lean into black excellence, sometimes they gatekeep. If younger talent behind them comes forward and they're not they're not doing the black excellence that they're doing. And so it's just like, they're not ready. And they can't be the other black person near me because I don't approve of their level of effort and things like that.
And that happens across every industry.
Sometimes you could be in a situation, right, where you're just kind of like, well, damn, do I have to go as hard as this person who doesn't sleep, who gives up all their weekends and stuff like that so that they can actually advocate for me when I'm not there? I see that happening too. And luckily, I'm at a point in my career right now where I can be a bit more selective with the opportunities that I take. But for somebody who's starting off and is just trying to get their first step into into the whatever industry you're trying to get into, it could be really, really difficult with these black excellence brunch gatekeepers.
So I think we're going to go to the next slide and we're going to engage the audience again with an easy poll. So is the concept of black excellence inherently anti-black?
Yikes.
What do the people have to say?
Oh, I misread. I misread it. Never mind. I said, oh, this is a spicy room.
It's jumping.
Okay. Give us a couple more seconds. So it seems like we have a, 2/3 rule say no. So Jordan, what are you thinking?
I don't think it's anti-black. I think that in order for me to believe that black excellence is anti-black, I would have to believe that black people are inherently not excellent or mediocre. So I don't think that it's anti-black, just the concept of celebrating black people who are doing things or creating things that are impacting people at a large scale. Because that's my definition, is like people who are like, or the definition I think a lot of people think about black excellence is like these people who are doing big things that are impacting a lot of people. And so, no, I don't think that it's anti-black. But like I said before, I think that it can be. It can be. If you're one of those gatekeepers that feels like I can't work with another black person unless they're a specific type of black person that I approve of in these predominantly white spaces, then yes, that is anti-black. And that's not black excellence, for the record. So, yeah, I think that black excellence can still be a positive thing, but we got to get to the root.
Yeah, like I don't think that the intention is to be anti-black. I think it's a positive intention, but I think what we do a lot of times as people and people of color, we take a concept and we run it into the ground. And that is when it gives, like, you hear black excellence every day and it's like, well, like now, what is black, like, what does this mean and why is everybody chanting it? It becomes sensationalized, and that to me is when it's just like giving a lot. And one thing that I don't hear is, like, I don't hear people talk about like white excellence and like, but why would you? How could you, right? You know what I'm saying? And so again, it goes back to what I was saying earlier about mediocrity and the idea and the audacity that white people and our white counterparts come into a space and they they're disruptive in that way, but they don't have the same.
They come in, do their job, and go home.
Right, they come in, do their job, go home, and now I come in, do my job, and go home,
It's the best thing.
and
It's
get
best
paid the
thing.
same thing, and I don't feel a way about it. And I think that we need to. I think people are running from mediocrity and what that means because you feel like there's a negative connotation with it. But now I'm reclaiming that word, and bitch, call me mediocre. I don't give a fuck.
Well, the thing is, like, even the concept of like mediocrity is a little bit different for black people, because I talk to a lot of black people who I admire from their talents or their skills and things like that, and they often will say things like, "My C work is better than everyone else's A work," and so I think that just the term mediocrity, like, it feels more daunting sometimes when we talk about it as a community, when really, I think the point is, like, you don't have to overachieve to receive a baseline level of respect
Yeah.
as a human.
Absolutely.
And I just would close and say maybe yes, but only in its current iteration, because I think in its current iteration, it's so focused in capitalism, it's so focused in being better than everybody that exists in the space, that like that to me is something that puts pressure on us that we don't need. Like, my therapist gave me a book called Rest is Resistance, and just about fighting against this grind culture, fighting against constantly feeling like if I have to give 1,000% so that everybody around me giving 1% will still have some level of respect for me. And that's just not something I'm really willing to sign up for anymore. So continuing. Last season, we did an episode with Kaylin Allen called on respectability politics, called You Ain't Black. How do we address the harmful narratives that suggest black excellence is only possible through assimilation or proximity to whiteness? Tony.
Well, you know, this really struck a chord with me too, because anytime we talk about these things, it always really grinds our gears. Is very polarizing, and I want to start here because
Oh, we got two.
We got two
today.
This is special. We only have one card
to start
normally.
here. So the same article that I spoke of earlier said that black exceptionalism plays into the idea of respectability politics. That if black people act the right way, they are deserving of decency and respect. And our obsession with black exceptionalism does not allow black people to just be. And that's sort of what I was saying and getting at earlier. And my thoughts are that to say that black excellence is only possible through assimilation or proximity to whiteness is to say that nothing is worth being or having, nothing that is worth being or having is possible for us without the approval of someone else. And for me, I take it back. Like, whether you're a black person or a white person, I don't give you permission or approval to sort of define my excellence. And I think that, you know, simply existing as who we are is being rebellious to that narrative. And so for me, like, what I like to do every day is just walk outside, wake up, just take in who I am and exist in that way. And I think that a lot of times we give that power to other people, and I'm tired of doing that. So what do you guys think?
I mean, I think it's even like the small things that we need to be mindful of. I have a story because like a few weeks ago, a friend talked to me about just sort of like their aspirations in life and what they wanted to do. And immediately I was just like, this doesn't feel like a this doesn't feel like a reasonable plan. And I asked that person, I was just like, I think that you should consider investing more in your corporate career.
Yeah.
And it was one of those moments where the friend left, and I was like reflecting on on the conversation in private in silence, and I was just like, did I just tell this person to abandon like their own passion to like get more money
back.
and invest more into a corporate career? And I basically did. And I called this friend and told them and apologized to them. I'm like, look, I'm so sorry. You shared this with me. This is what you wanted to do. I have no place in projecting onto you what my goals are and what I think Black excellence is and what I think you need to do to be able to become excellent. Mm-hmm. And it was one of those moments where it was the very first time that I've had that conversation with a friend. And I've been that friend for all of my friends, I think, that's been like, you need to interview, you need to like do this.
Get your
this is
resume
strategy.
together.
I can write it for you.
That's
like,
the interesting thing between Damon and Jordan. Like whenever something comes up, I always go to the both of you, and I always get two completely different things in which I should do. So Jordan is the one that's like, exactly, it's the work thing. It's focused on that. This is going to build your career, X, Y, and Z. And Damon is like, fuck that job, fuck those people, like do what makes you feel good. And then I'm somewhere in the middle. And that's now as we're having this conversation, it makes so much sense. Mm-hmm. And I'm always like that middle of the road person. But it's great to have people to bounce things off that do have very different opinions on it, so then I can land where I need to land and figure out like, okay, this is what I need to do for me.
Yeah, get your team together. Get
your team together.
Get people in your life who you know are going to say different things, but you have a level of respect for how they've run their lives.
Yeah.
Like me and Jordan disagree on everything. But I have a level of respect for him. I have a level of respect for where he's gotten in his life. And I think that even if we get to different places or different answers, it doesn't mean that one of us was right or wrong. I'm normally right, but joking, love you. But I think that's important. Like when you're thinking about your friend circle, and I think that's what the three of us do with each other. So.
Yeah, and I just think it's like important to, again, if you are somebody who wants to, your dream is to become the first fill in the blank on the moon, do it. Like, I'm not going to sit here and be like, you are trying to be white. Like, I'm not doing that. But I think that we need to be careful with the way that we build community with other people and making sure that, we're actually seeing them as human beings and not as these vessels for production, for monetary gain or whatever. So, yeah.
Yeah, I think for me, there's so much about my life that has been anti this proximity to whiteness or to what the rules have shown me, and so much of that I think about like my dad. My dad had a high school education, never worked in corporate, raised 5 kids, multiple kids adopted, and just poured into us and into his community. And I think about when he passed away, a concept that I constantly thought about. I was just like, is this person going to be forgotten because he wasn't excellent enough to be written down in a history book? Is this person going to be forgotten because he passed away before any of us had kids? And that to me is the thing. And he's the person that instilled in me watching all these documentaries about blackness, being proud of who I am, understanding that I can walk into any room and I'm just as fucking good as anyone else there. And that to me is why I rail so firmly against this concept of that we've constructed that because I've gone to Howard, or because I've worked in a corporate America, because I've rung this ladder, because I've traveled the world, I somehow am excellent. And this person who built everything into me wouldn't be the same person written down to it.
Right.
And that's what I think the question seeks to when we talk about proximity to whiteness, proximity to the rules, and to assimilating into a life that may not, like, I do things that he never dreamt of, but does that make my life better because it did exist further than the walls of Chicago where most of his impact was. And that's the thing that I find exceptionally important to think about in this conversation, because that's my personal story, but everybody in this room probably has a person in their life who may not have written the rules of like where they're going to be the Beyonce and be the world's greatest entertainer. They're not going to be the president of Howard University or whatever, but their impact to us and to our lives is excellent.
Right, and that is why we need to reimagine what the concept of Black excellence is, and just waking up, taking care of your children, or just taking care of your day-to-day chores that you have as an adult. Like just
it's
like
enough.
all of that is tough by itself. How often do we talk about how ghetto life is and how it's giving like, oh, I had no idea that it was all like, it's a lot. And I think that we need to give ourselves more grace and we need to kind of reimagine and think about what we deem as excellent and Black excellence. And so with that, we like to end with a little bit of homework. And I think that this will be a takeaway for everyone listening and also for us. And so we want to talk about how can we celebrate the diversity of Black queer experiences and recognize that there is not just one right way to achieve excellence. And so we kind of spoke to that a little bit, but Jordan, Damon, what do you think?
Really quickly, because I know that we're running on time. I think that by using this platform and sharing the platform with people who aren't necessarily celebrities or necessarily public figures, I think is incredibly important. I think oftentimes when there's a media platform, especially if you want to grow your platform, there's this pressure that I have to have the biggest names to get on the platform to validate what I'm doing. When really talking to people who are just in the community and who can talk about their unique life is also very valuable, which is why I love what Moby Talks is doing with the community conversation that we just had before this one, where it wasn't about bringing in, a celebrity, a household name in our community that can come and talk to us. It was about us talking to each other. And I think that that's really valuable in making sure that we're identifying the excellent moments in everyone's life. And it doesn't have to be the glitz and the glamour. So I think we can do that by sharing our platform.
And Damon?
I also wrote community. I think that so much of this is about not just identifying the sun, but also recognizing that there are so many stars, small, that glitter in the sky. And that collective experience is much more beautiful than just highlighting one brash, bright thing.
Yes. And for me, I'm going to go back to, child, it's okay to wake up and just exist and be and give yourself permission to be mediocre. Like, I think that that's okay. And we have to think about what that means. Like, for me, I'm going to wake up. I'm going to do what I have to do. I'm going to go to work. I'm going to type on the keyboard. I'm going to come home. I'm going to lay down and then call it a day. I don't have to strive for this thing in order to be impressive to anybody in the Black community or anybody in any other community. And so that's my takeaway. Like, girl, just live your life and give yourself some grace. So with that, that's all the time we have this week. And if you've enjoyed this conversation, let's keep it going. Let us know your thoughts at surfacelevelpodcast.com. And remember, stay curious.
Yeah.